Welcome back. Now, here's a question. In 2017, how do you debate the facts? In the Brexit campaign, voters were famously told Britain has had enough of experts. With Trump, his sidekick introduced alternative facts to the lexicon of political language. Huge amounts of newsprint and airtime have been devoted to trying to understand what's going on. The science, what's happening in our brains, may have a contribution to make here. We'll talk about that in a moment. First, have a look at this.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period. This kind of dishonesty in the media, the challenging that bringing about our nation together is making it more difficult.
Here's a picture of the crowd. Now, the audience was the biggest ever.
Do you think that talking about millions of illegal votes is dangerous to this country without presenting the evidence?
Not at all, because many people feel the same way that I do.
You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving, Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one
Chuck,
thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Is it your intention to always tell the truth from that podium, and will you pledge never to knowingly say something that is not factual?
It is. It's an honor to do this, and yes, I believe that we have to be honest with the American people. I think sometimes we can disagree with the facts.
It is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her. I was against the war in Iraq.
Donald supported the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again. Donald, I know you live in your own reality.
Well, let's throw this around for the next few minutes here. Let's talk to Dr. Sara Gorman, who's the author of the book Denying to the Grave Why We Ignore the Facts That Will Save Us. And we're joined here in the studio by Dr. Critica.Life, who's from London's King's College. He's written about the science of how we become more entrenched in our views. Thanks to both of you for being here on the programme. Sara, let me start with you, and you start your book from a position, why don't people believe in scientific facts? What did you conclude at the end of the book?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. When we look at scientific fact, what we really found was that people actually, their psychological processes, their natural psychology actually conflicts with the way that science proceeds and presents information. And there are a couple of ways in which this happens, but we uncover those in the book, and we note that scientists and the public health community, in fact, have not really adapted to understanding the way that people actually process information and making sure that they present information in a way that's compatible with our psychologies.
Just briefly, you talk about the brain getting a boost if we somehow bolster our arguments. Tell me briefly what you mean.
Sure. So that really refers to this phenomenon called confirmation bias, which you probably have heard a lot about in recent months. What happens is that it's pleasurable to hold on to views that you already hold. And when you look up things on the internet, and when you look for information, you favor only the facts that have to do, or the information, maybe it's not true, but it doesn't matter. It's that it agrees with what you already believe. And you actually see in the brain that there are biological mechanisms that reinforce this. It actually is a pleasurable feeling to go with what you already believe, and if you go against what you already believe, you activate the fear centers in your brain. And so it's very difficult to change your mind. And the problem is that science really depends on updating evidence and getting new information all the time.
Well,
if you can't change your mind, you're behind.
Let me bring Chris in, because you wrote that as a citizen, the growing division troubles you, but as a neuroscientist, it intrigues you. What do you think is going on?
So Sarah is right, but pointing at that study, because it does seem as if the brain gives ourselves a pat on the back when we manage to get rid of threatening information. But what's really interesting in that study to me is that the subjects in the study were a group of dedicated Republicans and a group of dedicated Democrats, and there was no difference in how their brains responded. It was just the mere fact that they were very strong in their conviction, in their opinion, that made this response happen.
And you made the observation, I mentioned in the introduction, that somehow this process is leading us towards becoming more dogmatic, more entrenched in our views. How do we reach that point?
So it is really through that process of feeling a surge of negative emotions when our beliefs are challenged, and then justifying them, finding additional reasons for our point of view, which drives us towards ever stronger opinion. And then if other people go the other direction from us, we become really more and more polarized from each other as time proceeds.
Which is why, I suppose, in the American election, you went from, I suppose, disagreement to actually ultimately casting the other person as somehow evil. We saw that absolutely nakedly in this.
Yes,
campaign.
absolutely. That's one of the ways of coping with it, denigrating the other person. Because if I hold my beliefs because I'm a clever person and I've thought about it and I've good reasons for it, then if you disagree with me, then obviously you must be either stupid or you must be evil for holding those views.
Sarah, in the Brexit debate, it was very interesting because I was struck by the amount of times voters would say they wanted more information. And actually, when they were given more information, they dismissed it because it didn't fit with what they actually believed.
Yes, so that's a phenomenon we see a lot, and it's a good sign that someone has fallen under the a belief system that's not necessarily consistent with facts, and that they really hold on to that belief system as a core part of their identity. We see it a lot in the anti-vaccine movement here in the US, in fact, where as soon as somebody's idea about why vaccines are unsafe is debunked, they go to another reason. They make up a new reason why, oh, it's not mercury, it's this other reason now, it's too many vaccines. And so they just they're very fluid, and they move from one issue to the next.
And you talk about
so that they
vaccines.
can maintain that core belief.
Yep, you talk about vaccines.
Yes.
We heard in that clip about the inauguration numbers. We had Donald Trump only last week alleging his phone had been tapped by Obama. I mean, is what you're describing in terms of what's going on in our brains making us more susceptible to being able to actually take on board stories like that?
I think it absolutely is. I think there are a couple of things in the brain. I think one thing that it needs to be really attended to is group psychology and the ways in which, again, it's very pleasurable to go to the group, and it's very uncomfortable to go against the group. And if you have a very charismatic leader like Donald Trump, the group is so much stronger because of exactly what my colleague in your London studio was saying before about how you can demonize the other and become a very strong us.
Well, let me ask Krista Mayer, how do you combat it? So we've established what is going on psychologically. How do you combat it?
So if it comes to political argument, just having a little bit more consideration for people who are on the opposite side of an argument to us would help. If we would all start behaving in that way, if we would understand that we're all driven by the same feeling of rightness, then that would really help. When it comes to scientists could do more work to connect with the public and to go out there, put in the footwork, and make sure that the audience knows that they can trust the work that scientists are doing.
Well, a fascinating area. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Krista Mayer and Sara Gorman, thanks very much for joining us on today's programme.